The night was quiet on the mining colony. Only the sound of machines hummed under the ground, and far above the stars shone cold and distant. The workers were tired. Most of them were already in their bunks, trying to sleep after a long day of digging. But Emma could not rest. She was lying on her thin bed, staring at the ceiling of her small metal room. Something in the silence made her uneasy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Then she heard it. A soft voice. A cry. It was so faint at first that she thought it was only her mind playing tricks, but the sound grew clearer. Mother? Emma sat up quickly. Her heart began to pound. She looked around her empty room. No one was there. The walls were bare, the door locked, the air still. She pressed her hand against her chest to calm herself. It came again. Mother. A child's voice, weak, sad, and close. Emma stood up and pressed her ear against the wall. Nothing. She checked under the bed. Empty. She even opened the small locker in the corner. Nothing. Yet the sound filled her ears, as if the child was calling directly into her mind. She whispered to herself, I must be losing it. I've worked too many hours. The colony was not a place for children. It was a place of dust, rock, and machines. No one would bring a child here. And yet the voice sounded real, too real to be a dream. She stepped out of her room and walked down the metal corridor. The lights above flickered. The air was heavy with the smell of oil and burned wires. Everyone else was asleep, but still she heard it. Mother. It was not just sound. It carried something else with it, an emotion, pain, fear, loneliness. Emma felt it pressing into her heart. She stopped in her tracks, breathing hard. Who's there? She whispered into the corridor. No answer. Only silence. She shook her head and tried to laugh, though her throat was dry. I'm just tired. That's all. Just tired. But her feet kept moving, pulled by something she could not explain. She walked past the sleeping quarters, past the cafeteria with its cold metal tables, past the control room with blinking lights. The voice guided her, calling softly, sometimes fading, sometimes clear again. Every time she thought it had gone, it returned. Mother. At last, she reached the edge of the colony, the outer doors that led to the restricted zone. No one was allowed there without special orders. Strange noises sometimes came from beyond those doors, but the workers were told never to investigate. It was unsafe. Emma stood frozen in front of the door. The voice was stronger here. It was no longer faint. It was crying. Her hands trembled. She touched the door panel. This is crazy, she muttered. I shouldn't be here. But then she felt it. The voice wasn't just sound, it was inside her chest. She felt the sadness of the child as if it was her own sadness. It was begging her not to leave. For a moment she remembered her own past, the time when she was a child, scared and alone, waiting for someone who never came. The memory struck deep and her eyes burned. No, she whispered to herself. I can't ignore this. She pressed the control panel. The heavy door hissed and opened slowly. Beyond it was darkness. The lights were broken here. The air was colder, heavy with dust. Mother. The cry echoed louder now. Emma took a step inside. Her boots crunched on the rough floor. She looked left and right, but the hall was empty. Her skin prickled as the cold air touched her face. She wanted to turn back, to close the door and forget, but something stronger pushed her forward. The corridor twisted and turned. Machines stood broken, covered in dust. Strange marks covered the walls, scratched into the metal, though she could not understand them. It felt like a place long forgotten. Then suddenly the voice screamed, Mother! Emma froze. It was so sharp, so filled with terror that her whole body shook. She covered her ears, but the sound was inside her head. She forced herself to whisper, Where are you? For a moment there was silence. Then faintly a small light flickered at the end of the corridor. Her heart pounded. She stepped closer. The light moved like something alive, and then she saw them. Two small glowing eyes, wide and filled with fear, staring at her from the shadows. Emma gasped. Her whole body went stiff. The child's voice came one last time, soft and trembling. Mother. Emma's lips parted, but no words came. Her world had just changed forever. Emma stood frozen in the dark corridor. Her breath came fast, white in the cold air. The two glowing eyes stared at her, unblinking. They were not human eyes. They were too round, too bright, shining like small moons in the shadows. Her first thought was to run. Every warning from the colony leaders rushed into her mind. Do not enter the restricted zones. Do not investigate strange noises. Do not approach unknown life forms, but her feet stayed still. Something about those eyes held her in place. They were not filled with hate. They were not filled with hunger. They were filled with fear, Mother. The voice was soft this time, almost a whisper like a child afraid of being punished. Emma's lips trembled. You're not real, she whispered to herself. But deep inside she knew the truth. The voice was real. The fear was real. The eyes were real. Slowly she crouched down, trying to make herself smaller, less frightening. She held out her hand. It's okay, she said softly. I won't hurt you. The glowing eyes blinked. Then, out of the shadows, a small figure stepped forward. Emma's breath caught. It was a child. Not a human child, but a child all the same. Its body was thin, almost fragile, with skin that shimmered faintly under the dim lights. Its hands were long and delicate, its head larger than its body, with thin ridges running over the skull. The eyes were the brightest part of it, glowing softly as if lit from within. The creature looked no older than 6 or 7 in human years. It trembled as it stood before her, clutching its tiny arms against its chest. Emma whispered, What are you? The child tilted its head, then took one step closer. Its lips moved, but no sound came. Instead, Emma felt the word inside her mind. Mother. The word was filled with raw emotion, loneliness, pain, and desperate hope. Emma's heart twisted. She looked around, half expecting the colony guards to appear, half fearing someone else would hear. But the corridor was silent. The only sound was her own quick breathing. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. Why me? Why can I hear you? The child blinked again. A tear, clear and glowing faintly, slipped down its cheek. Emma felt it like a knife in her chest. It was calling her because it had no one else. Are you alone? She asked. The child nodded, slow and heavy, as if the movement itself hurt. Emma felt a rush of instincts she had not expected. She had no children of her own. She had never even thought about raising one, not in this place, but something in her bones told her to protect this fragile creature. Shh, she whispered gently, the way her mother once whispered to her when she was small. You're safe now. The child stepped closer. Its thin fingers reached out and touched her hand. The skin was cool, almost weightless, but the touch carried warmth inside her mind. In that instant, she saw a flash of images, burning ships, screams, a planet in flames. A race destroyed, the child alone. Emma gasped and pulled back slightly, but the child clung to her fingers, shaking its head as if begging her not to leave. Emma whispered, her voice trembling. They did this to you, didn't they? Someone hunted you. The child's glowing eyes filled with more tears. Before she could say anything else, a loud noise echoed down the corridor. Heavy boots, voices. Emma froze. The colony guards. They were making their nightly rounds. Panic rushed through her veins. If they saw the child, they would not protect it. They would not show kindness. They would lock it away, or worse. She had heard rumors of specimens taken for research, never seen again. She looked down at the child. Quiet, she whispered urgently. Stay with me. The child's glowing eyes widened, and for the first time Emma saw trust in them. She grabbed its tiny hand and pulled it into the shadows of a broken machine. She crouched low, holding the child close against her chest. She could feel its heart, fast, terrified, beating against her. The guards passed by, their flashlights sweeping the hall. One beam stopped for a second on the scratched symbols on the wall. The guard muttered, Strange, never noticed those before. Then he kept walking. Emma held her breath until the sound of their boots faded into silence. Only then did she let go of the child, who looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. Emma whispered, You can't stay here. They'll find you. The child shook its head violently, its eyes glowing brighter. Again she felt the word pressed into her mind. Mother. Emma's heart broke. She had come here only to rest, to work and survive another day. She had not asked for this. She had not asked to become the protector of something alien. But in that moment, as the child held onto her sleeve with shaking hands, Emma knew the truth. She was the only one who had heard its voice, the only one who had answered, the only one who could keep it safe. Emma sighed deeply and brushed the dust from the child's face with her fingers. All right, she whispered. You stay with me now. But we have to be careful. No one can know about you. The child nodded once, slowly. For the first time, it almost looked calm. As Emma carried the child back through the silent corridors, she realized her life on this lonely colony had just changed forever. And somewhere deep inside, she felt it. The cry in the dark was only the beginning. The mining colony woke early. Machines roared, alarms buzzed, and tired workers dragged themselves out of their bunks. But Emma did not join them that morning. She sat inside her small room with the alien child hidden in the corner, wrapped in an old blanket. The child's glowing eyes peeked out, watching every movement she made. It was quiet. Too quiet for something that had cried so loudly the night before, but Emma could still feel it. Even when the child did not speak, she sensed its emotions pressing gently inside her mind. Fear, hunger, trust. Emma placed a small tin plate on the floor. It held bread and a bit of water, the only food she could spare. "Here," she whispered. "Eat." The child tilted its head. Slowly, with thin hands, it reached out and touched the bread. For a moment it sniffed, uncertain. Then it took a small bite. Relief spread across Emma's chest, though she wasn't sure if it was her own feeling or the child's. As the child ate, Emma studied it more closely. The ridges on its head looked like faint scars. Its skin shimmered faintly like starlight caught under the surface. It was delicate, too delicate for a place like this. "You shouldn't even be alive," Emma muttered softly. "But you are, somehow." The child stopped eating. It looked up at her, eyes glowing brighter, and once again she felt the word in her mind. "Mother." Emma's throat tightened. She shook her head. "I'm not your mother." But the child's gaze did not waver. It clutched the blanket tighter as if her denial meant nothing. Suddenly, a sharp knock rattled her door. Emma jumped. The child vanished beneath the blanket like a shadow. Her heart pounded as the knock came again, harder. "Emma!" a voice called. It was Jace, one of the foremen. "You're late for shift." "Everything all right in there?" Emma swallowed hard. "Yeah," she called back. Just overslept. I'll be there soon." Jace grumbled something under his breath, then his heavy boots echoed down the hall as he left. Emma exhaled slowly. She turned back to the child, who peeked out nervously from the blanket. "That was close," she whispered. "You can't make a sound when people are near. Do you understand?" The child blinked, then nodded. For the first time, Emma wondered if it truly understood her words, or if it only read her intent through that strange connection. She leaned closer. "Why can I hear you when no one else can?" The child's glowing eyes softened. Images flickered in her mind, not words, just feelings, memories. She saw flashes of tall figures that looked like the child, their eyes glowing bright. She saw them falling, hunted, running. Then she saw darkness, cages, cold walls. Emma pulled back, shaken. "They captured you." The child lowered its head, her hands curled into fists. She had heard rumors. Whispers that the company running this colony dealt in more than ore. People spoke of secret labs, of specimens taken from faraway places. She had never believed them. But now, sitting with this fragile child in her room, she believed. She rubbed her forehead. "If they know you're here, they'll take you again, and I can't let that happen." The child's hand reached out from the blanket, resting gently on her knee. It was a small touch, but it carried warmth through her whole body. Emma whispered, "Why me? Out of everyone, why do you call me mother?" This time the answer was clear. A voice not from outside, but deep in her mind. "Because you listen." Her eyes burned. She had no answer for that. Hours passed. Emma went to work, but her mind stayed locked on the child. Every clang of the mining drills, every shout from the foreman felt distant. All she could think about was the glowing eyes waiting in her room, depending on her. By evening, when she slipped back into her quarters, the child was still there, curled up on the blanket, asleep. But even in sleep, Emma felt its presence like a quiet heartbeat in her mind. She sat beside it, her hand hovering near its small head. She thought of the lonely years she had spent here, working day after day with no family, no one waiting for her. She thought of the silence she had lived with. And now here was something strange, fragile, and alive, reaching for her in the dark. Her decision was already made. Though she had not spoken it aloud, she would keep the child hidden. She would protect it. But deep down she knew the truth. Secrets never stayed buried in the colony for long. Someone would notice. Someone would come looking. As she lay down beside the child, closing her eyes, one thought echoed in her mind. If they find out, they will take it away, and I will never hear that voice again. The colony was never quiet for long. By morning, the metallic hum of drills and engines filled the air again. Workers moved through the corridors, their boots echoing on steel floors. But this day was different. Even before Emma left her room, she could feel it. A strange tension spreading like smoke through the colony. She slipped bread to the alien child who sat curled up in the corner, wrapped in the same blanket. Its glowing eyes followed her every move. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't make a sound. I'll be back soon." The child's thin fingers clung to her sleeve, unwilling to let go. Emma forced a smile and gently pulled free. "I promise. I'll come back." When she stepped out into the corridor, she noticed it immediately. Guards everywhere. They were posted at corners, checking IDs, scanning faces. Even the foreman looked nervous. Emma asked one of the workers nearby, "What's going on?" He shrugged. "New visitors. Not from the company. Mercs, maybe. They landed this morning. Big ship, armed to the teeth. They're looking for something." Her stomach tightened. Not something. Someone. She moved quickly to her shift, keeping her head down. But she could not escape the whispers. "They said it's dangerous, not human, they say. Specimen gone missing. Must be valuable." Emma's heart pounded. The child. They were here for the child. At midday, she finally saw them. The strangers marched through the colony with heavy boots and black armor. Their helmets glowed with blue lights and strange weapons hung at their sides. They were not miners. They were hunters. The leader, a tall figure with a scar across his helmet, spoke in a cold, sharp voice. "There has been an escape. A specimen, small, fragile. It cannot survive without help. If any of you know anything, speak now. Silence will be treated as guilt." The workers shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. No one dared. Emma kept her face blank, though her chest burned with fear. The leader's voice grew colder. "We will search every room, every corridor, every shadow. The creature cannot hide for long." Emma turned away quickly, afraid they might see the truth in her eyes. That evening, she rushed back to her quarters. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. Inside, the child sat waiting, glowing eyes wide with worry. Emma knelt beside it. "They're here for you," she whispered. "Hunters. They'll take you away if they find you. We have to move." The child pressed its forehead against her hand. In her mind, she felt one word: fear. "I know," Emma whispered. "I'm scared too." She grabbed a small pack, stuffing bread and a flask of water inside. She pulled the blanket tighter around the child, covering its glow as best she could. Then came the knock. Hard. Loud. "Inspection!" a voice barked from outside. Emma froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The child gripped her arm tightly, trembling. The knock came again, sharper. "Open up, worker!" Emma's mind raced. If she opened the door, they would see the child. If she didn't, they would break it down. Her eyes darted to the vent at the back of her room, a narrow maintenance shaft barely wide enough to crawl through. She whispered fast, "We're leaving now." The child didn't hesitate. It crawled into the vent first, its small body sliding into the shadows. Emma followed, pushing the pack ahead of her. The vent was tight, metal scraping her elbows and knees as she crawled. Behind them, the door crashed open. Heavy boots stormed into her quarters. "She's gone," a voice growled. Emma's heart pounded in her ears as she crawled faster, the sound of angry voices echoing behind her. The vent opened into a dark service tunnel far below the main colony. Pipes hissed with steam and the air smelled of rust. Emma pulled the child out and pressed her back to the wall, trying to listen. Voices carried faintly through the tunnels. The hunters were already spreading out. The child tugged at her sleeve, its glowing eyes looking up at her. She felt the word in her mind again. Why? Emma crouched, brushing dust from its face. "Because they'll hurt you. Because you deserve better. And because—" she swallowed hard. "Because someone has to protect you." The child leaned into her hand, and for a brief moment warmth filled her chest. A bond stronger than fear. But the sound of boots came again, closer this time. The hunters were searching the tunnels. Emma grabbed the pack, slung it over her shoulder, and picked up the child. "Hold on," she whispered. "We run." And then she moved, deeper into the maze of tunnels, the echo of their pursuers chasing after them. For the first time since arriving on this colony, Emma wasn't just working to survive another day. She was running for her life, and for the life of the child who had called her mother. The tunnels stretched on like endless veins beneath the colony. Pipes dripped, steam hissed, and shadows clung to every corner. Emma carried the child in her arms until her muscles burned, then set it down gently to walk beside her. For hours they moved through the dark, never stopping for long. Behind them, faint echoes of boots reminded Emma that the hunters were still searching. She didn't know how far the tunnels went or if they would ever lead to safety, but she knew one thing for certain: going back was no longer possible. At last, they found a small chamber, an old storage room, abandoned and filled with dust. Emma shut the heavy door, dragged a broken pipe in front of it, and slumped against the wall, exhausted. The child sat quietly on the floor, hugging its knees. Its glowing eyes dimmed as if it too was drained of strength. Emma pulled the bread and water from her pack. "Here," she whispered, handing it over. The child ate slowly, its thin hands trembling. Emma noticed it was trying to take only small bites, saving some for later. The sight made her chest ache. "You don't have to ration," she said softly. "It's yours, eat." The child looked at her for a long moment, then finally finished the bread. When it was done, it reached out, placing one small hand on hers. The touch filled her mind again, not with words this time, but with images. A vast sky filled with twin suns. Towers of crystal rising high above valleys. Laughter. Dozens of voices like the child's, young and old, singing together. Then fire, explosions, ships falling from the sky, the crystal towers shattering into dust. Emma gasped and pulled her hand back. Her heart pounded as the images faded. "That was your home," she whispered. "And they destroyed it." The child's glowing eyes shimmered with tears. In her mind, she felt one word pressed gently against her thoughts: gone. Emma covered her mouth with her hand. She wanted to comfort it, but what could she say? She had lost things too, but never her entire world. Never her whole people. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence of the tunnels pressed heavy around them. Finally, Emma whispered, "Why me? Out of all the people here, why call me mother?" The child tilted its head. Another wave of emotion filled her mind. Not just words this time, but a memory. She saw herself, sitting alone in her small room weeks ago, staring at the ceiling, feeling the same loneliness she had carried for years. She saw how empty her heart had been. The child had felt it too, from the shadows. Emma blinked hard, tears filling her eyes. You felt me. You knew I was lonely." The child nodded slowly. Its hand reached for hers again, small fingers curling around her calloused palm. For the first time in years, Emma felt something she thought she had lost: belonging. She pulled the child closer, wrapping her arms around it. Its small body trembled at first, then relaxed against her. It rested its head against her shoulder, and she could feel its steady breath. In that moment, Emma knew she wasn't protecting the child only out of pity. She needed it as much as it needed her. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. "Not while I'm here." The child's voice brushed her mind again, soft and warm this time. "Mother." Her throat tightened. She pressed her cheek against the top of its head. "Yes, if that's what you need, then I'll be your mother." The warmth between them grew, filling the cold storage room with a strange sense of peace. For a moment, Emma almost forgot the hunters, the colony, and the danger. But peace never lasted long. Somewhere above, heavy machinery roared to life. The walls shook, dust falling from the ceiling. Emma's eyes snapped open. They were moving equipment, digging deeper into the tunnels, searching. The child tensed in her arms. Fear poured into Emma's mind like icy water. She held it tighter. "Shh, we'll find a way." But even as she said it, her chest tightened with dread. They couldn't keep running forever. Supplies were low. The hunters were organized. And the colony was not a place where secrets could stay hidden. Still, as the child clung to her, Emma made a silent vow. She would not give it up. No matter the cost. Because for the first time in years, Emma had something to fight for. Not just survival. Not just another shift, another day. She had a child, alien or not, who had chosen her. And she would protect that bond until her last breath. The tunnels shook with the sound of drilling. Echoes of boots, voices, and the hiss of machines carried through the dark. The hunters were no longer just searching. They were closing in. Emma tightened the straps of her pack and looked down at the child who clung to her hand. Its glowing eyes were wide with fear, but she felt more than fear inside her mind. She felt the question pressing against her thoughts. What will happen to us? Emma knelt so she could look into its eyes. We're not giving up. Do you hear me? As long as I can run, they won't take you. The child pressed its forehead against hers. Mother. Her throat tightened. She pushed the emotion down. Come on, she whispered. We need to move. They slipped deeper into the tunnels, their footsteps soft against the dust-covered floor. But the sound of the hunters grew louder. Blue lights flickered in the distance, helmet lamps sweeping across walls. Voices barked orders, sharp and merciless. Emma pulled the child into a side passage. They crouched low as beams of light passed over the tunnel mouth. Spread out, one of the hunters ordered. It's close. I can feel it. Emma's heart thudded in her chest. She held the child tightly against her, hardly breathing. Minutes stretched like hours until the hunters moved past. Only then did she dare to whisper, We can't stay down here. They'll trap us. She remembered an old shaft that led out to the surface. Broken, dangerous, but it might be their only chance. She guided the child through narrow passages, their hands brushing against cold pipes, their ears filled with the echo of pursuit. At last, they reached the shaft. It was a vertical climb, rusted and unstable, leading toward faint moonlight far above. Emma stared up at it, then looked down at the child. It's our way out, but it's going to be hard. The child's eyes glowed faintly. It touched her hand and she felt one word, trust. She smiled weakly. All right, let's climb. She lifted the child first, guiding its small hands to the ladder's rungs. Then she followed, her muscles straining as she climbed higher and higher. The air grew colder, fresher. For a moment, hope stirred inside her. But then the hunters' voices rose below. There, the shaft! They're escaping! Blue lights filled the tunnel beneath them. Weapons clattered as the hunters gave chase. Emma gritted her teeth and climbed faster, pushing the child upward. Her hands slipped on the rusted metal, her arms shaking, but she did not stop. A shot rang out. Sparks exploded against the ladder near her feet. The hunters were firing! Go! She shouted to the child. Don't look back. The child climbed faster, glowing eyes fixed on the light above. Emma kept close behind, shielding it with her own body as more shots echoed below. Halfway up, the ladder groaned. Metal snapped. A section broke loose, sending shards clanging down into the darkness. Emma's foot slipped, and for a terrifying moment she dangled in the air. The child reached down, its small hand glowing faintly as it touched hers. A warmth surged through her arm. Not strength exactly, but a wave of determination. She pulled herself back onto the ladder, breathless. Thank you, she whispered, though she didn't know if it heard her words or only her heart. At last, they reached the top. Emma pushed the hatch open and cold night air rushed in. Stars blazed across the sky, and the barren landscape stretched out like an endless desert of stone. She pulled the child out, then climbed after it, collapsing onto the rocky ground. For a brief moment, relief washed over her. They were outside, free, but the hunters were already climbing. She could hear them, their boots slamming against the ladder. Emma grabbed the child's hand and ran across the rocky plain. The air was thin, her lungs burned, but she forced her legs to move. The child stumbled beside her, but it never let go of her hand. Behind them, blue light spilled out of the shaft. The hunters were coming fast. Emma scanned the landscape and spotted a jagged cliff nearby. At the base, a narrow cave mouth gaped like a shadow. She pulled the child toward it, heart hammering. They slipped inside just as the hunters reached the surface. The cave was shallow, but it gave them cover. Emma crouched low, pulling the child into her arms. The hunters' lights swept across the rocks outside. She knew they would find the cave soon. She had to decide, fight or run again, but she was tired. Her body ached. She could not run forever. The child looked up at her, its glowing eyes shimmering. In her mind, she felt its fear carry in something else. A question. Will you leave me? Emma's throat closed. She shook her head fiercely. Never. They'll have to kill me first. Footsteps drew closer. Shadows loomed outside the cave. Emma set the child gently behind her and picked up a jagged rock from the ground. It was a useless weapon against their armor and guns, but she held it tightly anyway. The hunters appeared at the cave mouth, their blue lights blinding. There it is, the leader said coldly. The specimen and its caretaker. Emma spread her arms wide, shielding the child. You'll have to go through me. The leader raised his weapon. So be it. Emma's pulse roared in her ears. She was ready to throw herself forward, to fight with nothing but her bare hands if she had to. Because this was her child now, and she would not let them take it. The cave glowed with blue light as the hunters stepped closer, their weapons pointed at Emma, their armor shining cold and merciless. Emma stood firm, her arms spread wide, shielding the child behind her. Her chest heaved, her body bruised and tired from running, but her eyes burned with fire. You can't have her, Emma said, her voice rough. The leader tilted his head, his helmet hiding his face. It is not yours to keep. Step aside, human. This creature belongs to us. Emma gripped the sharp rock tighter in her hand. She belongs to no one. The hunters raised their rifles. Blue beams of light charged at the tips. Emma felt the child clutching her shirt, trembling. Its voice filled her mind again, desperate, pleading, Mother. Emma knew she could not win. Not against soldiers with weapons, armor, and orders. But she also knew she could not surrender. The child had chosen her. It had trusted her. And trust was something sacred, she whispered without turning her head. Listen to me. You're going to live. No matter what happens to me, you keep going. The child shook its head fiercely, tears glowing in its eyes. No. Mother, stay. Emma's own eyes burned, but she forced a small smile. I can't, but you can. You have to. The leader gave the order. Take them. The hunters stepped forward. Emma hurled the rock at the first helmet and lunged with all her strength. The impact was useless against their armor, but it startled them just enough. She grabbed a loose fuel canister from the cave floor, half buried in the dust, and slammed it against the wall. Sparks burst, fire erupting in the narrow space. The explosion rocked the cave. The hunter stumbled back, shouting. Emma's body was thrown to the ground, her skin burning, ears ringing. Pain flooded her senses, but she forced herself to move. Run, she screamed, pushing the child toward a narrow gap in the cave wall. Go! The child froze, eyes wide with terror. Emma grabbed its small shoulders and looked into its glowing eyes one last time. You must live. Remember what I told you. Humans are not all cruel. Don't ever forget. Tears streamed down the child's face. For a moment it clung to her, refusing to let go. But then with shaking hands it crawled into the gap, vanishing into the dark beyond. Emma turned back to face the hunters. Smoke filled the cave. Her chest ached, but she stood tall. The leader stepped forward, weapon raised. You've wasted your life. Emma met his gaze, her voice steady. No, I've given one. The last thing she felt was peace as the world went white. Years later, the planet was silent. The mining colony abandoned. Its machines rusted and buried in dust. But life had returned in small places. Green shoots rising where once there had been only rock. And in that silence, a figure stood tall. Not human, not child anymore. Glowing eyes stared at the horizon. Ridges crowned its head, no longer fragile but strong. The alien child had grown. It carried scars of the past, but also a voice that carried across minds and hearts. Around it stood others of its kind, survivors who had come from hidden places drawn by its call. They listened as it spoke. Its voice was not only alien now, but filled with the warmth of humanity. Long ago, when I was lost, hunted, and afraid, I called out for a mother. Only one answered. She was human. She gave her life so I could live. The crowd bowed their heads in silence. The leader continued. She told me humans are not all cruel. She told me to live. And because of her, I do. The alien leader touched a pendant hanging from its neck, a simple piece of metal scrap Emma had once carried. She was Emma, a worker, a fighter, a mother. She is gone. But her spirit is with us. Her sacrifice is our future. The glowing eyes of the crowd shone brighter, filled with hope. And so the story of one human, who had nothing, became the legacy of a people. A story carried across stars, a story that would never be forgotten. Far above, the night sky glittered with countless stars, and among them, unseen, the memory of Emma lingered, a light in the dark, a voice that had answered when no one else did. The alien child, no longer a child, but a leader, whispered softly into the wind. Mother. And in the silence of the universe, it almost felt like she answered,